Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and we have reached a very special week in our lives. That's right, JJ McCarthy will go out on the TCO Performance Center field and take snaps as quarterback one for actual OTA practices. That's right, for the very first time, he will be the first string QB1 of the Minnesota Vikings in a practice setting that's mostly 7-on-7 and is considered the learning phase. But it still does have significance because this is the first time that we're going to see him, and media will be there Wednesday, including myself, and then once next week and for 3 days for minicamp, which is usually more significant because at that point they've had a couple weeks of installing offense. They do more 11-on-11s. But this week, at least, will be the first time that we can see him playing quarterback for the Vikings after all of the surgery, the discussions, the Aaron Rodgers thing that got talked about for a really long time, and the Vikings landing on him, letting Sam Darnold go to the Seattle Seahawks, deciding to stick with their future of the franchise quarterback, JJ McCarthy. And we finally got here to the point where he is on the field after all that conversation. And now we will get to see what that looks like. So I'm going to have a whole list of things that I want to go through that I will be looking for over these next couple weeks, not just from one practice, because it's oftentimes 7-on-7. They're just ramping up and you can't figure out everything. But it's really over these next couple of weeks where we'll have access to the Minnesota Vikings to see what that offense looks like. So I'll get into that in just a minute. Did want to toss this out there real quick that we're doing some planning for the next year in terms of our ad schedule. So if you have a business, you want to reach out, if you want to be a part of this and become a sponsor for Purple Insider, MatthewColler@gmail is where to reach me through email. And then on Twitter @MatthewColler, great place to reach out. I guess you could leave it in the comments as well, but I might not see it. So go ahead and reach out if you have a business and you're interested in partnering with me and our team. So let me get now into all the things that I got for OTAs and what we'll be looking for. Shockingly, this list begins with JJ McCarthy's comfort in running the first team offense. Now, I chose my words wisely here because I didn't just say how he performs with the offense. It really isn't that important to me in terms of watching JJ McCarthy, how many of these passes get completed. I know, and I've already had this discussion with Kevin Seifert and a few others, that we're all going to be writing down how many completions, how many incompletions. JJ McCarthy went 7 for 10 today with an interception or something. And that's fun and I guess interesting, but really, for me, it's not how many passes reach the hands of his wide receivers, because if he's got some rust and he isn't throwing perfectly sharp and perfectly accurate in the first OTA practice, well, you got your June, July, August, and a little bit of September to get that figured out. And last year, we saw him struggle in OTAs with his accuracy. And then by the end of training camp, he was very accurate, as you all saw in the preseason game. But he had been doing that in practice for a few weeks where he had made massive improvements. So coming off of all this time and all this recovery, I would expect that there is some rust to shake off from McCarthy from a throwing perspective. But what you want to see is that he had a 400 level class, a master's degree class in Kevin O'Connell's offense last year. Now, he doesn't know how every single receiver runs their routes yet. There's a lot of chemistry that has to be built over the summer. I remember even TJ Hawkinson talking about how different it was between Sam Darnold and Kirk Cousins in the way that they approached his role in the offense. And that applies for every single player for a quarterback. So there's work to be done there over this spring and into July and August when we get to training camp. But to me, it's more important that he looks comfortable doing everything he's supposed to do and knows where the football is supposed to go, and that they're not having to constantly stop the practice. They've got these video boards out there that have the all 22 of the practice. And what you see a lot of times, if something goes wrong, is Kevin O'Connell kind of stopping and watching it back and showing something. And now that's always going to happen for the learning phase of OTAs, but you don't want it to look choppy and to look like, oh, nobody really knows where they're supposed to be and so forth. And I don't doubt that McCarthy will look in command because he has had so much experience previously with this offense, but I'm looking more for the feel of the thing. Does the practice have the flow to it? Does it seem like the ball's coming out on time and going toward the right places? That's a lot more important. And I'm talking again over the next couple weeks. So by the end of minicamp, does it look like they're pretty locked in with each other and ready to go once they arrive at training camp? That is the main thing that I'll be looking for from JJ McCarthy. And then we'll be listening for just how he talks about how this is all going or how it's gone, because he's always an introspective type of person. But last year, there were times where he kind of admitted, like, I've had a tough practice and it didn't go as well as I want. But the thing that was always so impressive about McCarthy is that he would bounce back the next day. So if he had a tough practice the next day, you could count on that he was going to be more locked in. But you don't want to see too many of those that don't go the way they're supposed to go. So I'm going to have the PSA pretty much every single time we talk about this. We're not overreacting. We're not saying JJ McCarthy is either a superstar or a bust after any of these practices, but the job is to inform about how it went. So I'll be trying to observe as much as I can from JJ McCarthy's first and monumental OTA and minicamp practices. All right, some other things. Who's QB2? We had more discussions about QB2 than I wanted over the last number of weeks until they were able to get at the draft Sam Howell. And it would make complete sense if Sam Howell is just locked into that job. He's had a full season as an NFL starter. He was QB2 last year for the Seattle Seahawks. But my question is there a competition between Sam Howell and Brett Rippon or not? Brett Rippon has played a handful of games in the league. He's won 2 games, lost 2 games as a starter. He is more experienced, and he does know the offense better than Sam Howell. And the thing with Howell is, even though he started a year in the league, it's not like it went that well. I mean, there was a run in the middle of the season for Washington in 2023 where it was okay for Howell, if not borderline good some games. But overall, his season leading the league in interceptions and sacks is not something that just screams out, you've got the job locked in forever, my friend. So I think that there could be competition. And if Howell is right off the bat QB2 in these 7-on-7s and OTA drills, then okay, then that's probably going to be that way. But if they're switching and they're mixing and matching, then maybe we're going to have a competition. And the way that I've always looked at OTAs and minicamp is that it's like the qualifying for a race. It's not the race. The actual race for jobs and for positions, that obviously happens in training camp when they can put on pads and they can play real football things. But in OTAs and minicamp, you do get a sense for who's picking it up, who's getting it, and then where they're going to start. So if they're switching in and out QB2, then we're going to start probably with a competition in training camp. But if it's just Sam Howell, locked in, all set, then that's likely his job, and it would have to go really badly in training camp in order for him to lose it. So I will be keeping an eye on the QB2 reps while all eyes are on JJ McCarthy. I promise I won't be taking eyes off of McCarthy, but just when the other quarterback mixes in. Okay, so what does the depth at wide receiver look like? And this is the easiest position for somebody to stand out that isn't actually all that good. The minicamp has fooled us many times about certain players who have a really great minicamp, but then look, they're not actually guys who could play in the league, because once it gets physical, that changes how a lot of people are able to play in the NFL. But right now, the corners can't do a whole lot. They're just trying to stay with them and make plays on the football. But it's not like you want your corners abusing your young rookie guys or UDFAs. But just how it plays out will tell us what the coaches are thinking. By the end of minicamp, what is that depth chart starting to look like in the back end? Because there are 4 positions that are very much locked in. And we'll have to get an update on where Rondale Moore stands. I'm not expecting to see him in OTAs or minicamp. Maybe we'll find out. That also is another thing on my list, is the injury updates. But let's say Rondale Moore is not there. So you have your 4 guys that are absolutely set in stone: Jefferson, Addison, and Jalen Naylor, and also Ty Felton. Like, none of those guys are not going to be cut from this team. Everybody else, though, kind of wide open. And you have some guys who have been here a few years that could shine. And, a guy who always makes a standout performance in these OTAs and mini camps is Lucky Jackson. He is always somebody who makes noise and is making plays, making catches. And last year he got a lot of run when Justin Jefferson wasn't there for OTAs. Thayer Thomas is another player who's still here because he made a good first impression as a UDFA back in OTAs a couple years ago, and he's been developing behind the scenes. And then you have these UDFAs who have come in, which Silas Bolden is probably the most interesting, the punt returner from Texas. Can't really get a good look at punt returning from an OTA or a mini camp. Even in training camp, you kind of have to have that in preseason games, but really quick, lightning quick, caught a lot of passes when he was in college. So is that somebody, not so much last year with Texas, but before, I believe, Oregon State. So is that somebody, or is there another guy who we haven't talked about that starts to make a little noise? Or is the veteran Tim Jones someone they identified from the Jaguars that didn't play a whole lot, but maybe there's something there for this team that Keenan McCarthy liked or whatever? We'll see. But the wide receiver depth is going to be one of the biggest battles when we arrive at training camp. So this will be our first impression of that. Injury updates are always going to be a big thing at this time of year when you've had some players that have had injuries. So what we've heard from Christian Darrisaw and his recovery from an ACL injury is that he's ahead of schedule, that he's doing well, but we haven't gotten a lot of specifics about what his timeline might be, just that Kevin O'Connell has said it's going well. Now, if we just start to try to do our math a little bit, the odds of him starting week 1 are not particularly great, but it's also a little bit close when it comes to that ACL injury, because he was lost in the middle of the season. And just, doing the calculus there, think about Hockenson, who was lost at the end of the season and then came back in the middle. If you're lost in the middle, can you come back at the beginning? We don't really know. So how far along is he really? Same with Rondale Moore. Do we see him? Do we see Mekhi Blackman, who should be 100% ready to go? He was, the 2023 draft pick that played well in his rookie year and then tore his ACL on the first day of training camp last year. So the fact that that was the first day of camp last year should mean that he's fully recovered and all set. But is he? Because you never know if there's, complications or something like that. And then do any other injuries crop up, or has anybody else had an off-season surgery that they're recovering from? And then we see them, on the guys who are recovering from injuries field. We'll find all that out as we go forward into OTAs. But some pretty important players there, especially Darrisaw, but also Blackman for sure on that injury list. Next thing on my list, what does our first glimpse of the front 7 look like? Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, Harrison Phillips. This is going to look pretty new, but to me, I'm most interested in what it looks like behind them. Taki Taimani, Levi Drake Rodriguez, Jalen Redmond, and then Ty Ingram Dawkins, who we don't really know what to expect from Ingram Dawkins. I think a lot of you are excited about him because he was such a unique player at Georgia, lined up all over the place. To me, that says there's probably a lot of development to go, but sometimes we even get, just for example, a sense that somebody's made a good first impression, like Ivan Pace in 2023. Ivan Pace was working with the second team in minicamp, and we're like, oh, this undrafted free agent is with the second team. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe we'll get some of that. But how do those couple of players who are vying for position start to rotate in? And that goes for the backup edge rushers too. Bo Richter, Gabriel Murphy. There's some intriguing undrafted free agents that they've brought in, but there aren't any veterans in that group. So where do those guys line up? And of course, Dallas Turner, what's he doing in all this? Is he just taking some reps off of the other guys that are edge rushers? Is he lining up at a place we don't expect him to line up? Is he lining up at a lot of different places? Now, again, this is just setting the stage. If somebody, just another example, like Josh Metellus in OTAs 2 years ago is just lining up in some different spots. And we're like, okay, well, that's interesting. He's kind of in the box or whatever. And it wasn't until midway through training camp 2023 that Metellus was on the field all the time with the first team lining up as a box safety. That's when it became clear something was happening. But again, only small little morsels of information from minicamp. So we'll see what we get from Dallas Turner when it comes to that as well. And I'm sure a lot of you will want to know, like, what does he look like? I don't think this is the time for somebody to have, in just a couple months, stacked on 15, 20 extra pounds, but that will be worth observing maybe a little more in training camp. I mean, I guess if the guy looks enormous when we see him at OTAs, that'll be notable, but I'd be surprised. That's a short period of time. We'll see. I don't know. JJ McCarthy was able to put back on the weight, so maybe Dallas Turner has beefed up as well. Have not seen him, so we will find out about that. But the whole front seven is kind of intriguing. And, where does Eric Wilson fit into this? He's back on the team. And, where does Kobe King, their rookie linebacker, fit in? We're going to get a sense for that when we see these next few weeks of practices. How about the defensive backs, the inexperienced defensive backs, the Mekhi Blackmon, the Dwight McGlothern, Theo Jackson, Jay Ward? Those are kind of the big four of intrigue to me. You might even throw in Jeff Okudah because he hasn't played that much football as a former high draft pick. But those four are guys that they have been developing. And, Mekhi Blackmon, even though he couldn't play last year, similar to JJ McCarthy, had the experience of seeing the defense and how it played out, and he's been in it before. Theo Jackson, these guys know what to do, but can they get out there and do it? And where do they fit in exactly? Does it look like there's competition? Is there rotation? Or is it, hey, look, this is Isaiah Rodgers and Byron Murphy and everybody else who work in with the second team, and you guys are backups? How's that going to go for the secondary early on here? Is it lining up for a Isaiah Rodgers, Mekhi Blackmon, a Dwight McGlothern competition? Or do they have their specific roles? Because last year, that was where Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffin, they had their really specific roles. And then Byron Murphy did a little bit of everything. Is that how it's going to be? Or are they making a change with that? We should get our first little hints of that as we go into this OTAs. And punt returning, have to mention the punt returning. The Minnesota Vikings have just not had anything for punt returning since Marcus Sherrills. I seem to remember a couple of D.D. Westbrook punt returns. Brandon Powell, his most memorable punt return was one that was stripped from him in Philadelphia, a guy who hardly ever fumbled but did there. And then it was fair catch season last year for Brandon Powell. Are they looking for somebody who can make an impact? I mentioned Bolden, Isaiah Rodgers, maybe. I think he's done a little bit of it in the past. But when you go through the roster, there's not a lot of guys who you could say, oh, yeah, this is your clear-cut punt returning competition. It's this guy versus this guy. So if we get a little bit of a glimpse of that, what does that competition look like? Because I think the Vikings special teams are a little bit under the gun here for this year. Last year, it was just such a non-impact, zero impact unit. Nothing from the kick returns. They just didn't even want to do them. This year, they're going to have to do them. Nothing from the punt returns. The punting was okay. The kicking overall was pretty good, but they need to be better than what they were last year on special teams just to get a little bit of an edge there. And they have gotten nothing from punt returning in a long time. And now the final one on my list, and the most important, is vibes. Of course, it's vibes. That's number one. How do they come out of this minicamp? And I'll tell you why vibes are important. 2018 could not have come out with worse vibes. It seemed like the head coach and the offensive coordinator and the quarterback were at odds. And that's not good. And then also Nick Easton got hurt that year. And so your starting left guard is out for the year with back surgery. And your head coach seems very unhappy at the quarterback. You just made the highest paid guy in the league. That's bad, folks. Now with Kevin O'Connell, it's very hard to end up with bad vibes. But you don't know, right? Off the field stuff or injuries or whatever might happen. Last year is a counterexample to where the vibes felt so good. I thought this team seems to be believing in itself already because they knew at that time that the over-under was 6.5 and that everybody was picking them last in the division. They knew it then. And I think that's when O'Connell, and he brings this up, started to implement that message of like, hey, just, one day at a time, 1-0 each week, whatever it was that he was saying over and over again. But his message to the team was, I think we're a lot better than what the world thinks we are. And last year they bought into it. So you're really getting your message to the team out here. I am very curious, and we'll see if I can get this question in at some point. This is me saying it to myself, so I try to remember to ask, what is it this year? Because you won 14 games, and I know that Jonathan Grenard is going with more is required, but what is Kevin O'Connell's message to the team? Because last year it was, show the haters, prove the haters wrong. Well, you can't really use the haters after you win 14 games. I don't think that that's something that you're allowed to do. Their over-under is only 8.5 still, but I don't even think that's a hating over-under. That's just a let's get people to bet both sides of this over-under because the Vikings are an interesting team type of number. If you put them at 10.5, if you're Vegas and the gambling community, then people would be too afraid of McCarthy. But if you put them at 6.5, it would be too easy. So that's how that number ends up landing. But the point just being, you can't use that anymore. You can't just come out and say no one believes in us, not when you were playing for the NFC North last year in week 18, and everyone does believe in you now that you've taken the right path and gone with the right quarterback and all those things. So what is his message and what are the vibes? The vibe from the very earliest access that we got, which was off-season workouts, voluntary off-season workouts, was with Grenard talking about the shirts, the more is required shirts, and with Brian O'Neill saying, I don't care if we run or pass 75 times a game, I just want to win. There was a desperation type of feel that these guys know it, that you only have so many more years, maybe just one, of Harrison Smith. And Harrison Smith returned to compete for a Super Bowl. He did not return to come hang out with his pals, although I'm sure he enjoys the team and everything, but he came back to put his body through this again to try to win a Super Bowl. And I think they all felt that when he returned, it was, I believe we can do this. And so I want to see if that's kind of the feeling or if that carries over, because that was the sense that I got early on. Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys going through that with me. And I've also got a bunch of questions from you, and a good way to get them into me, again, MatthewColler@gmail.com. Tweet me at Matthew Coller. Or, by the way, we got the newsletter. This is a great time to be supporting Purple Insider through the newsletter. Daily articles, long form features, practice breakdowns, everything that you could want in written form at purpleinsider.football. Okay, let's get to your questions. Got a long one from Jack here. Jack says, wanted to spark some discussion about a player that we seem to have forgotten about going into OTAs, Ambry Thomas. Thomas was a third-round pick by the 49ers in 2021, and we signed him to our practice squad back in December after a failed physical with another team. Thomas didn't play that much in his rookie year, a little bit in 2022, and actually won the starting job in 2023 with the 49ers Super Bowl team. I don't have access to PFF Premium, but I believe in 2023, he played about half of their snaps and had a 71-ish PFF grade. With the cornerback room being wide open after Byron Murphy, I feel like he has a shot to earn a role. I would be curious to see where he sits in the pecking order at OTAs. Do you think Thomas has a chance to earn a role? Well, let me call up some Ambry Thomas statistics, and this tells you that I really do like to give you my honest reactions to your questions and not research beforehand. So I have them prepared or something. Let me pull this up. Yeah, so you're a little bit off if we include the postseason. We'll try to get a bigger sample size with Ambry Thomas, a 61.5 PFF grade in 2023 on 573 snaps. And when he was targeted, opposing quarterbacks had a 99.5 rating, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, and 6 pass breakups. I don't know what to make of Ambry Thomas. He's less than, or can you be less than? He is not yet 26 years old. He is 25 and he will turn 26 at the beginning of the season. Former third round pick, 103rd selection, 2021 draft. I think that the Vikings like to do this, and Jeff Okudah is an example where if somebody was a fairly high draft pick and they like them coming out in any way and they're available, they're going to give it a shot. And Ross Blacklock was one of those guys. And we've seen, Jeff Okudah is already one of those guys. We've seen a number of them come through over. Rondale Moore is definitely this type of player where they're just taking some swings. Even Marcus Davenport, remember that contract was not spectacular. It was kind of, hey, let's see if there's something there with Marcus Davenport that we can take advantage of. And now they're doing this with Ambry Thomas. I don't know what to expect from him. The fact that he did fail a physical with another team, the fact that he didn't play at all last year, none of that really points to anything good. And if the 49ers really loved Ambry Thomas, they probably would still have him on their football team because, as you said, he was involved in that team that went to the Super Bowl last year. He only played one snap in the Super Bowl, but did play. Maybe he must have gotten hurt then. I don't recall. He must have gotten hurt, but he played very poorly for the 49ers in the playoffs. 32 and 35.9 PFF grades. Really got lit up in those games. 7 for 9 passing against him. It looks like it was a pretty tough time for him. Had a couple of good games early in that season, but I'm guessing that there's an injury issue that is lingering with him. But you take shots at guys and you see what happens. And every once in a while during training camp, we'll see somebody emerge and go, wait a minute, this guy's getting a lot of run. All of a sudden, maybe something's going on there. That's happened in the past, and maybe that will happen again. That's really the best I could do, though, because when I look at his numbers, his profile, the fact that he didn't play last year, there's nothing that says to me, like, watch out for this guy. This guy's going to take the Vikings by storm or be in this competition for real when they have some players that they like that are on the young side that they've already pushed to the front of the line. But you never know. I'm going to throw it under the category of just you never know, and that's why we have training camp. My sights are not really set on him until they have to be, until he's getting second team or first team reps. But sometimes guys show up and win jobs that you never expected that to happen. So we'll see on Ambry Thomas. That's the best I can really do right now. I don't know how much else there can be as a discussion other than when we run through the list. If he's getting some second team run, then he deserves to be mentioned for somebody that could be on the watch list for training camp. Next question comes from Paul. Says, I don't think enough is being made about the home and away disadvantage the Lions have in their schedule. The Vikings and Packers have their most difficult games at home, while the Lions play the presumed contenders on the road. Worthy of discussion, worthy of a neck roll. Yes, I think Paul, and Paul included in his email an entire list of all the teams and their home and away games. So that is what's worth a neck roll, is the fact that he went to the trouble of showing me and demonstrating in an Excel sheet, here's what it actually looks like with the home and road. I think that the answer is yes, it deserves to be discussed to some extent. I don't know how much, though, because something I wrote about even back in 2020 when I was first launching Purple Insider, talked about 5-year anniversary, well, there was no fans in the stands. And what I was trying to figure out was, well, how much of a disadvantage are the Vikings at for not having any fans in the stands? Honestly, I think the advantage was enormous for the Minnesota Vikings. Was it enormous for a lot of teams in the NFL? That I'm not as sure about. When you look up the numbers, there still is a home field advantage. There's no doubt about it. And so the Lions are at a disadvantage here. But also, how many road games did they lose last year? They went 15-2. How many road games did they lose the year before? I don't think that the road edge or the home edge is what it used to be in the NFL. Now, where you play them, you have to go to Philly. That is hard. You're right about that. Teams that have to go into Philadelphia, that might be one of the places, the few places that you could say has a significant edge. I think overall, we talk about that, how tough is the schedule? And I've said that it's really not predictive. Where people rank your schedule, whether it's based on the Vegas lines or whether it's based on vibes or whatever, it's not predictive. I looked at both the Vegas-based over-under strength of schedule and NFL.com having human beings rank schedules. And I think the human beings did better by quite a bit using some common sense and still missed by a ton. Like, it's not really that predictive for strength of schedule, but the Vikings have 2 road games zapped off the face of the earth and made into neutral field. That is big. That is a big advantage for the Vikings, I think. Now, if they blow both games overseas to 2 teams they should beat, well, then who knows? But those are winnable games, more winnable now, especially against Pittsburgh, that they don't have to go into Pittsburgh. And even Cleveland has an enormous gap between how they play defense, home and road. And I would guess that some of that is Myles Garrett getting the jump off of the snap is a big deal there. So yes, I think that it is worth mentioning, but when you play those teams, who gets their quarterback hurt, how all of it plays out once we get into the season, if we could ever predict it, then this game would be boring. So I don't know what those games are actually going to look like once we get there. We hype up every team, everybody's got a chance, and then 1 week into training camp, someone gets hurt and you go, well, that changes everything. So we'll see, but I think that your point is valid that the Detroit Lions, if you are picking a regression team, they lose both of their coordinators and they're playing a tough schedule with a lot of the tough games on the road, that I would circle and say, yeah, I think that they could drop back. They could be more of a 10-win team than a 15-win team last year, and the door could be open for the Vikings to win the division, and this is a factor. Could be a factor. But yeah, I mean, that I think it's worth bringing up. Lucas says, what do you expect to see from J.J. McCarthy in the preseason? It's not necessarily a question about predicting his performance, rather how much time we can expect KOC to have him actually playing. Oh, I look forward to, this will be fun. This will be fun. When we get right to the first preseason game, the press conference beforehand, we will ask Kevin O'Connell, so how much is McCarthy going to play? And O'Connell will say, I got a plan. And then we'll say, what's the plan? And he'll say, I'm not telling the plan. And then we'll say, why not? And he'll say, because I'm not telling. And it happens every year with every coach. I'll never understand why they don't want to reveal their plan, but maybe this year will be the one year that he's a tendency breaker and he tells us exactly how much McCarthy's going to play. If I had to guess, I would say that J.J. McCarthy will play in 1 preseason game for maybe 3 series or 4 series. That's my guess, because they have at least, it's official with the Patriots. And then I think somebody said that they're going to have a joint practice with the Rams. Was that released yet? I don't know. But I think they're going to have 2 joint practices. We know for sure with the Patriots. I have to Google it. Vikings-Ram joint practice. Is that out there? Let's see. Is that official? I don't know if that's official. Let's see. Vikings hope to hold. That's the headline. Looking to have joint practices. That was out of the owners' meeting. So I don't think that they've made that 100% official yet, but we'll see. So anyway, the point being that Kevin O'Connell is big into the joint practices, and it's been out there. I think the Rams mentioned it, that they want to have joint practices with the Vikings, or there's tentative agreement or something. I forget what it was that was out there. I'm guessing that they do. So if they're going to do 2 joint practices, then J.J. McCarthy's not playing in those games. They treat the joint practices like they're the games. And I think that's a smart way to do it, because you don't have people actually trying to tee off on your quarterback, but you do get all of the high speed and physicality. Honestly, those joint practices are more physical than a lot of the preseason games that you see, and it's first versus first. It's not like, oh, well, we're playing our first team, but the other team is playing no starters. And you can use Justin Jefferson, who never plays and never should play in any kind of preseason game. So my expectation is that he'll play a couple series in the first one, and that is going to be it. And then it will be all joint practices. And I will again say that I wish that at least one of the joint practices was in a venue large enough for more crowds to come, because I really believe that Vikings fans would sell out the lower bowl of a joint practice with J.J. McCarthy involved. But if you have tickets to those, or you can get out to TCO Performance Center for those, that's going to be pretty intense, I think. But I don't think because of that that you're going to see a whole lot of preseason action from JJ McCarthy. All right, next question comes from Dermoman. Sorry, that's a tough one. You're going to have to correct me in the comments how to say that. Excluding Dallas Turner and Theo Jackson, who from the 2024 roster is primed for a much larger role? I'm hoping for Dwight McGlothern. Dwight McGlothern would be my potential pick. That kind of depends on the health, though, of the corners. I mean, the reason McGlothern didn't play last year was really because they were healthy. He got in a couple of games here or there, but they were very healthy in that secondary. Stephon Gilmore got banged up a little bit. Fabian Moreau played, but aside from that, he was the veteran ahead of Dwight McGlothern, and those were big games. They needed a veteran in there, but now that he's got a year of experience, is he really competing? We have not seen a ton of rotating the corners when they're the starters, but they also haven't had a ton of depth with the corners in the past. So I think McGlothern does have a chance there. Jay Ward would be one that I'm going to keep kind of throwing out there, because Jay Ward is one of those guys that just plays special teams and doesn't catch anybody's eye and has some good data on his special teams. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what this guy's actually playing? That's happened enough times, from whether it's the Anthony Harris, the Andrew Sendejo. It's happened enough times, Metellus too, that you've got my attention if you're a good special teamer and you play the safety position. So he's another guy that has been developing behind the scenes and on special teams that might have a chance to carve out a role for himself. And the other one is a guy that everybody kind of fell in love with last year during training camp, but Bo Richter has been on my radar since last year. I wrote a story. I sat down with Bo Richter, a very interesting background story of how he ended up at Air Force and how he kind of emerged at the last minute before his final year in college and all that sort of stuff. Very interesting guy. Also a great athlete and very highly productive in his last year of college, then came out in the preseason and made plays right away, then earned a spot and then got on the field in special teams and made plays right away. So he has my attention as somebody who was on the team last year. Nobody thought a lot about because he was just on special teams, and now looks like he might be in line for a rotational role or a backup role. And you never know when that could turn into something more than that. So those would be my answers. Another one, I'm sure everybody will be looking for Levi Drake Rodriguez. A very raw player last year, got some first team reps when Jerry Tillery was hurt, but ultimately did not play many snaps. A couple against the Seattle Seahawks, and that was really it. But he made a play or two on those few snaps. There's potential there. How much did he improve since last year is going to dictate where that goes. So let me answer one more question. This one comes from Jake J. If you had a vote for the Hall of Fame, would you vote Harrison Smith in the first year he would be eligible? Also, I'm assuming Jefferson will be inducted into Canton someday, assuming he stays healthy and has similar production going forward. How many more seasons do you think that he would have to play to make it in? I'm guessing if he retired tomorrow, he probably wouldn't because he hasn't played long enough. So yes, now this one, I actually did take a peek beforehand at the numbers. I did not have Ambry Thomas's stuff up, but I did take a look at Justin Jefferson. So right now, he is around 7,500 yards total receiving for his career. Receivers that get to 1,100 are usually very fringe, and some of them aren't even in that have gotten to 1,100 yards. But if you get to 1,300 yards, you are pretty much a lock. So that calculates to about 4 more seasons for Justin Jefferson of elite play. I think he can play a lot longer than 4 more seasons. He's still pretty much on the young side and strikes me as a guy who could play into his mid-30s and rack up crazy stats. But just from the perspective of the Hall of Fame, you got to be at least over 1,200 these days and a little bit more. There's a 17th game now, so that's a little bit of an advantage for a couple hundred yards that adds up over time every single season. And I think that for a receiver, the bar is very, very high. And that's why you couldn't put him in if it happened right now. Even though he's off to a historic start to his season, you could not put him in right now because there's so many great wide receivers. Jimmy Smith is a great example. Someone brought up Torrey Holt the other night on the show, but there's probably 5 or 6 wide receivers who were at their prime, top 5 receivers in the league and have big numbers, but just not quite enough to get them over the hump and make them Hall of Famers. So he's got a long ways to go before he could be a lock. Now, the start that he's gotten off to in his career is as great as anyone who's ever played the game. And because his peak is so high, his totals might not have to be as high. And we've seen that from Sterling Sharp. We've seen it from Terrell Davis. Justin Jefferson truly dominated in ways that other receivers haven't. But with receiver, there's always another guy from your era. There's always another guy coming that is going to take your place if you don't have those big numbers. It's kind of like with baseball pitchers. It used to be 200 wins. Now nobody cares about that. I understand. But, that number, 3,000 hits, they used to have baselines that would put you in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I think with wide receivers, it's kind of like that with yardage totals and receptions. You kind of got to be this tall to be in the Hall of Fame. And Jefferson, I think someday will get there, but is not there yet. As far as Harrison Smith, it's hard to answer when you say the first year that he's eligible, because I think that by the time Harrison Smith is up for that conversation, we will have more people inside of that room talking about PFF grades and PFF data telling a story on Harrison Smith. He's got sacks, he's got interceptions, he's got tackles, he's got 6 Pro Bowls, which puts you in that discussion for the Hall of Fame. Usually 7 makes you more of a lock, which is just how silly this is, because some years you're just as good, but you don't have as much hype, or your team doesn't do as well, and you don't get a Pro Bowl nod or an All-Pro or something, or All-Decade team where I think they gave it to Eric Berry and Harrison Smith probably deserved it. And all those sort of political factors that go into Pro Bowls, All-Pros, different awards. But where it really tells the story of Harrison Smith is the PFF data, because it shows a player who was truly elite at his position year after year after year as a driving force of the Vikings defense. It shows his versatility, his playmaking, how dreadful opponents were when they tried to test him in coverage, how much he impacted the pass rush, how much he impacted the run defense. Like, those things are graded and they're shown in those numbers that don't really get used, I think, so far in the discussions for Hall of Famers, because we don't have complete data on many careers. Like Jared Allen, I think you only see the end of his career get graded by PFF, not the very beginning, if I'm thinking about this right, or maybe the very, very beginning where they were first formulating those grades. But now those grades have been here for a long time, and they've worked out a lot of the kinks in that. And I'm not saying that they're perfect, but they are a much, much more telling way to look at a safety over many years than sacks or interceptions even, because if they never throw the ball against Harrison Smith, he's not going to get as many picks, right? That's I think a bad way to look at any defender. 3 plays or 5 plays over a season when you play 1,000 snaps? And that's another thing that I'd like factored with Harrison Smith. 1,000 snaps every year. Snap count should matter. It shouldn't just be a bunch of awards. How many snaps were you out there for your team? That's value that's being accrued. First ballot depends a lot on who else is up for it, because I think there's going to be a long waiting list. I do not understand why the Hall of Fame decided this year to make it more difficult for guys to get in, and that could hurt someone like Harrison Smith unless they make a change there, because there's a lot of players who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame but are not yet there. So they just continue to wait and wait. All right. Great stuff. Cannot wait for this. Speaking of waiting, cannot wait for my first opportunity to get out there at TCO Performance Center and see JJ McCarthy really taking those first team reps, throwing to first team wide receivers, having Kevin O'Connell come and break down plays with him. Oh, the excitement. No, really. I mean, it is every single step here along the way. It's one of those things where you kind of want to put it in the bank, in the memory bank of, if this becomes something really special, we'll kind of remember that first year he didn't play and finally getting out there in that off season and how we felt about it and all those things. So I am one to always keep a close eye on things like that. So thanks everybody for your time. We'll have the live show as always on Monday night. have some really fun guests here trying to project players for this year, including JJ McCarthy. And then Dane Mizutani and I will break down that big old practice on Wednesday. So a lot to look forward to, and I look forward to hearing from you guys as well. So thanks again for joining, and take care. Wolves in 6. Football.